Marcus Chen never thought the war would end with him standing in the ruins of New Geneva Station, holding a dying alien's hand while explosions still echoed through the metal corridors. The Zephyrian warrior's blue-scaled skin had turned pale, almost translucent, as his three hearts struggled to pump the strange silver blood that leaked from his wounds. "Promise me," the alien gasped, his voice a whistle through specialized vocal cords. "Promise me, you will protect her." Marcus looked down at the small figure huddled behind a collapsed beam. She couldn't be more than 20 in human years, though he knew Zephyrian aging worked differently. Her skin shimmered with the same blue scales as the dying warrior. But hers held an iridescent quality that caught the emergency lighting and threw it back in dancing patterns. Her large, dark eyes stared at him with a mixture of terror and something else he couldn't identify. "She is my daughter," the warrior continued, his grip tightening on Marcus's armored glove. "The last of her bloodline. The hegemony killed the rest of our family when they discovered what she is." Marcus had been fighting the hegemony for 3 years. He'd seen their work before. Entire colonies turned to glass. Species hunted to extinction for resources, or simply because they posed a perceived threat. The human military had joined the Galactic Liberation Front only after the hegemony had attempted to harvest Earth's oceans and strip mine Luna. "What do you mean, what she is?" Marcus asked, though he already suspected he didn't want to know the answer. The Zephyrian's eyes, which had been growing dim, suddenly flared with desperate intensity. "She carries the genetic markers of the ancients, the ones who built the jump gates. The hegemony believes they can use her blood to unlock technologies that have been lost for millennia." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The jump gates were the only thing that made galactic civilization possible. Massive rings of unknown metal and crystal that allowed instantaneous travel across impossible distances. No one understood how they worked, only that they had existed long before any current species had developed spaceflight. "They want to breed her," the warrior whispered, his voice barely audible now. "Create a slave race of living keys to open every secret the ancients left behind." The alien girl, Lirale, he remembered the warrior calling her, spoke for the first time. Her voice was like wind chimes, musical and ethereal. "Father, don't make him carry this burden. He doesn't understand what it means." But Marcus was already shaking his head. He'd seen too much death in this war. Too many families torn apart by the hegemony's endless hunger for power and resources. "I understand enough. You're asking me to keep her safe, not just safe," the warrior said, his breathing becoming more labored. "Hidden. The war may be ending, but there are factions on both sides who would use her for their own purposes. Some among the Liberation Front would see her as a weapon to be wielded. Others would study her like a laboratory specimen." Marcus looked around the destroyed station. Through the twisted metal and shattered viewports, he could see the hegemony fleet retreating in the distance, their massive dreadnoughts limping away, trailing plasma and debris. The Liberation Front had won this battle. Maybe even the war. But victory always came with a price. "What's your name?" he asked the girl directly. She lifted her chin with a dignity that seemed too old for her apparent age. "I am Lirale Vexthari, daughter of Commander HFY Vexthari, heir to the Sapphire, throne of the third moon, of Zephyr Prime." "That's quite a title for someone who's about to disappear," Marcus said gently. Her father managed a weak laugh. "She was trained from birth to lead our people. But now she must learn to hide among yours. Can you teach her that, human? Can you teach a princess to be invisible?" Marcus thought about his own life. He'd been a construction worker before the war, building skyscrapers in Neo-Tokyo. He knew how to blend in, how to be just another face in the crowd. It wasn't glamorous, but it had kept him alive when the fighting got bad. "I can try," he said. The warrior's hand went limp in his. Marcus closed the alien's large eyes and stood up slowly. Around them, the sounds of battle were fading. He could hear human voices in the distance, his squad calling his name. Soon, this place would be crawling with military personnel, intelligence officers, and bureaucrats. All of them would want to know what had happened here. "Listen to me," he said to Lirelei, who was still crouched behind the beam. "In about 30 seconds, a lot of people are going to come through that door. Some of them are good people. But good people ask questions. And questions lead to records. Records lead to the wrong people finding out about you." She nodded, understanding immediately. "What do you need me to do? Can you make your skin look different? Less distinctive?" She closed her eyes and concentrated. The shimmering quality of her scales faded, and their blue color shifted to a more muted tone that could almost pass for an unusual human skin condition in dim light. "It's uncomfortable to maintain, but I can hold it for several hours." Good. When they come in, you're going to be a civilian refugee I found hiding in the debris. You don't speak English very well, and you're traumatized from the attack. Can you play that part?" "I am traumatized from the attack," she said quietly. "But yes, I can play helpless if needed." Marcus heard his squad leader's voice getting closer. "Chen, where the hell are you?" "Here," he called back. Then, quieter to Lirelei, "What's a normal name for your people? Something that won't stand out?" "Lyra," she said after a moment's thought. "And my family name? Vance. It's close enough to my real name that I'll respond to it naturally. Lyra Vance it is. Remember, you're just a refugee. Nothing special about you at all." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez appeared through the twisted doorway, followed by the rest of Marcus's fire team. His eyes swept the scene, taking in the dead Zephyrian warrior and the cowering alien girl. "Civilians?" Rodriguez asked. "Found her hiding when I was checking for survivors," Marcus replied. "Her father didn't make it." Rodriguez nodded grimly. He was a good soldier and a decent man, but he had the same problem as most military personnel. He saw situations in terms of objectives and threats. A traumatized refugee was just another logistical problem to be solved. Med teams setting up a triage station in Bay 7. Get her checked out and processed with the other refugees. Command wants all civilians off station within 6 hours. Roger that, Sergeant. As they made their way through the damaged station, Marcus kept one eye on Lirelei. She played her part perfectly, staying close to him but not too close, flinching at sudden noises, keeping her eyes down when other soldiers looked at her. Her disguised appearance helped. But it was her acting that sold the deception. The medical bay was chaos. Dozens of wounded from multiple species lay on stretchers, while human doctors and alien medical specialists worked frantically to save lives. Marcus found an empty corner and gestured for Lirelei to sit down. "Wait here," he told her in the simplified speech pattern he might use with a traumatized refugee. "Doctor, come soon. Check you okay." She nodded mutely, playing her part. Marcus stepped aside and activated his personal communicator. He needed to think fast. The military would process all the refugees, assign them to resettlement programs based on their species and homeworld status. Lirelei would be sent to a Zephyrian colony world where she'd be registered, documented, and eventually discovered by exactly the kind of people her father had wanted to protect her from. He made a decision that would change both their lives forever. When Dr. Sarah Kim finally made it to their corner, Marcus was ready. Kim was a Navy medic he'd worked with before, someone who trusted his judgment. "What have we got, Chen?" she asked, already pulling out her medical scanner. "Refugee. Zephyrian female, early 20s. Found her in the debris field. Possible concussion, definitely in shock. She doesn't speak much English." Kim ran her scanner over Lirelei, frowning at the readings. "That's odd. Her biological signatures are unusual. Even for a Zephyrian. Almost like she's got genetic markers from multiple species." Marcus's heart nearly stopped, but he kept his expression neutral. "War zones are stressful. Maybe it's affecting the readings?" "Maybe," Kim agreed, though she didn't sound convinced. "I'll note it in her file for follow-up." "What's her name?" "Lyra Vance." Kim entered the information into her tablet. "Next of kin? Father was killed in the attack. No other family that she knows of. Damn. Another orphan? Kim looked at Lirelei with genuine sympathy. Well, the Zephyrian Resettlement Council will take care of her. They've got good programs set up. Actually, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice casual, I was thinking maybe I could sponsor her. For resettlement on Earth. I mean, I'm rotating home next month anyway, and I've got the space. Kim raised an eyebrow. That's unusual, Chen. You sure you want to take on that kind of responsibility? Alien refugees need specialized care, cultural adaptation programs. I've been thinking about it for a while, Marcus lied smoothly. After everything I've seen in this war, I want to do something positive, you know? Help someone rebuild their life, instead of just tearing things down. It wasn't entirely a lie. He had been thinking about what he'd do after the war, how he'd deal with the things he'd seen and done. Maybe helping Lirelei would help him too. Kim considered this for a moment, then shrugged. Your funeral. I'll put you down as her sponsor and start the paperwork. Fair warning though. Earth immigration is going to want extensive background checks on both of you. That's fine, Marcus said, hoping it actually would be fine. I've got a clean record. All right. She'll need to stay in medical observation for another 12 hours. Then she can be transferred to civilian transport. You'll both ship out on the same vessel to Earth. After that, it's up to the immigration authorities. As Kim moved on to the next patient, Marcus sat down next to Lirelei. She looked at him with those large, dark eyes. And he saw a flicker of hope there for the first time. Thank you, she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear. Don't thank me yet, he replied just as quietly. This is going to be the hardest thing either of us has ever done. You're going to have to become someone completely different. No more princess, no more royal bloodline, no more ancient genetic legacy. Just Lyra Vance, war refugee, trying to build a new life on an alien world. And you? She asked. What do you become? Marcus looked around the medical bay, at all the wounded and dying, at the aftermath of a war that had consumed half the galaxy. I guess I become someone who protects instead of destroys, someone who builds instead of tears down. That seems like a worthy transformation, Lirelei said. We'll see. First, we have to survive the next few months without anyone figuring out who you really are. 1. Outside the viewports, the last of the hegemony fleet disappeared into jump space, probably retreating to regroup in some distant sector. The war might be over. But Marcus suspected that the real battle, the one to keep Lirelei safe and hidden, was just beginning. He thought about his apartment back on Earth, a small place overlooking Tokyo Bay. It had seemed so empty when he'd left for the war 3 years ago. Now he tried to imagine it with another person living there. Someone who'd grown up on alien worlds under foreign stars. Someone whose blood might hold the keys to technologies beyond human understanding. Are you afraid? Lirelei asked suddenly. Marcus considered lying, telling her everything would be fine. But something in her eyes told him she'd see right through that kind of comforting platitude. Terrified, he admitted. But I've been afraid for 3 years straight. At least now I'm afraid for something worthwhile. She smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. Despite her disguised appearance, despite the tragedy she'd endured, despite the impossible situation they found themselves in, that smile was radiant. It reminded Marcus why some things were worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth the risk. Then we'll be afraid together, she said. And perhaps, somewhere between fear and hope, we'll find a way to build something good from all this destruction. Marcus nodded, looking out at the stars beyond the damaged station. Somewhere out there was Earth, and the chance for both of them to disappear into the vast anonymity of human civilization. It wouldn't be easy, and it probably wouldn't be safe, but it was a chance. And sometimes, Marcus reflected, a chance was all anyone could ask for. 6 months after arriving on Earth, Marcus Chen was beginning to think they might actually pull off the impossible. Lyra Lay, now legally known as Lyra Vance, according to her immigration documents, had adapted to human society with an intelligence and grace that continually amazed him. She'd learned to navigate Tokyo's crowded streets, master the subtleties of human social interaction, and even find humor in the strange customs of her adopted world. But sitting in the small restaurant near his apartment building, watching her try to eat ramen noodles with chopsticks while maintaining her human disguise, Marcus was reminded that nothing about their situation was normal. "The thermal properties of this soup are fascinating," Lyra said quietly, steam rising from the bowl between them. "On Zephyr Prime, we would never consume liquids at such temperatures. Our physiology requires much cooler sustenance." "Just say it's hot," Marcus replied with a smile. "Normal humans don't analyze the thermal properties of their lunch." She laughed, a sound that still reminded him of wind chimes, despite her efforts to modulate it. "I'm still learning to think like a human. Sometimes my scientific training shows through." That was another complication Marcus hadn't anticipated. Lyra Lay wasn't just royalty. She was brilliant. Her education on Zephyr Prime had covered everything from quantum physics to bioengineering. Hiding that kind of intelligence was almost as difficult as hiding her alien heritage. "Speaking of thinking like a human," Marcus said, lowering his voice, "we need to talk about your job interview tomorrow." Marcus Setterty, Fauner. Marcus Setterty, Marcus Setterty. Lyra had been studying human culture through online courses and language programs, but she needed legitimate employment to maintain her cover. Marcus had found her a position at a small translation service that worked with refugee communities. It was perfect. Her linguistic abilities were genuinely impressive, and the job would explain her familiarity with alien cultures. "I've been practicing," she assured him. "I can speak with the proper accent patterns now, and I've studied the cultural references humans use in casual conversation." "Did you know that referencing something called Star Wars can establish social bonds with approximately 60% of human males?" Marcus nearly choked on his noodles. "Where did you learn that?" 2. Internet forums. They're remarkably educational, though I'm still confused about why humans enjoy sharing images of small felines with amusing text overlays. "Memes," Marcus explained, "and probably best to avoid mentioning those in your interview." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus's friend, James Liu, who slid into the booth across from them with the casual confidence of someone who'd never learned to knock. James was a data analyst for Earth's Immigration Authority, which made him both useful and dangerous to their situation. "Hey, Marcus. This must be the famous Lyra I keep hearing about." James extended his hand to her with a friendly smile. "I'm James. Marcus has told me a lot about you." Lyra accepted the handshake with just the right amount of hesitation for someone still adjusting to human customs. "It's nice to meet you, James. Marcus has mentioned your work with helping refugees." "It's good work," James agreed. "Though I have to say, your paperwork was some of the cleanest I've seen come through the system. Usually there are discrepancies, missing documents, that kind of thing. But everything checked out perfectly." Marcus felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his expression neutral. He'd spent weeks carefully constructing Lyra's false identity, using contacts in military intelligence and calling in favors from his time in the service. Apparently, he'd done too good a job. "I was fortunate," Lyra said simply. "The Liberation Front kept excellent records, even during the chaos." "Must have been," James replied, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with that answer. "Actually, that's kind of why I wanted to meet you. I've been reviewing some of the refugee files from the end of the war, and I noticed some interesting patterns." Marcus forced himself to take another bite of noodles, even though his appetite had completely disappeared. "What kind of patterns?" "Well, it seems like certain high-value refugees disappeared from the processing system right around the time the war ended. Not officially missing, just transferred to classified programs or relocated without proper documentation trails." Lyra's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around her chopsticks. "High-value refugees? Individuals with specialized knowledge, royal bloodlines, unique genetic markers, that sort of thing. The kind of people both sides might want to keep track of for political or scientific reasons. James leaned forward slightly. I'm starting to think some of them might have been hidden in the regular refugee population to protect them. The silence stretched for a moment too long before Marcus spoke. Makes sense. If I were running from political persecution, I'd want to disappear too. Absolutely, James agreed. And honestly, I hope they stay hidden. Some of the files I've seen suggest there are still people looking for these individuals. Not all of them with good intentions. Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. What do you mean? Corporate interests, mostly. Companies that think alien biology or technology could be profitable. There are rumors about bounties, private military contractors, that kind of thing. James glanced around the restaurant, then lowered his voice. Look, this is completely off the record. But if you ever encounter someone who might be more than they appear, the best thing you can do is help them stay invisible. I'll keep that in mind, Marcus said carefully. After James left, Marcus and Lyra walked back to his apartment in silence. It wasn't until they were safely inside with the door locked and the privacy screen activated that either of them spoke. How much does he know? Lyra asked immediately. I don't think he knows anything specific, but he's suspicious. James is good at his job, which means he notices things other people miss. Marcus began pacing the small living room. We need to be more careful, or we need to leave, Lyra said quietly. Marcus stopped pacing. What? You heard what he said. There are people looking for refugees like me. Corporate interests. Bounty hunters. How long do you think it will be before they track me down? And when they do, what happens to you for helping me? We don't run, Marcus said firmly. We've worked too hard to build this life. Besides, where would we go? At least here we have legal documentation, a place to live, jobs. Marcus. Lyra's voice was gentle, but serious. You don't understand what you've gotten yourself into. My father told you I carry ancient genetic markers, but he didn't tell you everything. Marcus sat down heavily on his couch. What else? Lyra hesitated, then moved to the window that looked out over Tokyo Bay. The lights of the city reflected off the water, creating patterns that reminded Marcus of her true skin when she allowed it to shimmer. The genetic markers aren't just random sequences, she said finally. They're functional. Active. What does that mean? It means I can interface with ancient technology. Not just theoretically. Actually use it. Touch a jump gate. Control node. And feel the quantum pathways. Read data from ancient computers that have been dormant for millennia. Possibly even activate systems that no one has been able to access for thousands of years. Marcus felt the weight of that revelation settling over him like a lead blanket. Jesus Christ, Lyra. You're not just a walking key. You're a master key to the entire ancient infrastructure. Now you understand why my father was so afraid. Why the hegemony wanted to breed me like livestock. Why the Liberation Front might want to study me. I'm not just valuable. I'm potentially world-changing. All the more reason to keep you hidden, Marcus said after a moment. Or, all the more reason to run before someone figures out what I am. Their argument was interrupted by a soft chime from Marcus's security system. Someone was at the door. Marcus checked the video feed and saw two people in expensive suits standing in the hallway. They looked like corporate executives, but something about their posture suggested military training. Expecting anyone? Lyra whispered. No. Marcus moved quickly to the wall safe where he kept his military sidearm. Can you maintain your disguise if you're stressed? For a while. Her skin was already shifting to its muted human appearance. The door chimed again, followed by a polite knock. Mr. Chen, we'd like to speak with you about Miss Vance. Marcus and Lyra exchanged glances. There was no way these people should know about her unless they'd been watching for some time. Coming, Marcus called out, buying time to think. He activated the apartment's emergency protocols, which would record everything and automatically transmit it to his lawyer if anything happened to him. He opened the door with the chain still attached. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Chen, my name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and this is my associate Mr. Park. We represent Prometheus Biosystems. We understand you're sponsoring a Zephyrian refugee named Lyra Vance." "That's correct. What's this about?" "We'd like to offer Miss Vance a very lucrative employment opportunity." "May we come in?" Every instinct Marcus had developed during 3 years of war was screaming at him to slam the door and run. Instead, he forced a smile. "Sure, but I should mention that Lyra doesn't speak English very well yet. I'll probably need to translate." Dr. Vasquez smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Chen. We've done our research." Marcus unhooked the chain and stepped aside, allowing the 2 visitors to enter. Dr. Vasquez was a severe-looking woman in her 50s, with prematurely gray hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Mr. Park was younger, Korean, and carried himself with the controlled alertness of professional security. "Miss Vance," Dr. Vasquez said, looking directly at Lyra, "it's an honor to meet you. We've heard remarkable things about your family's contributions to Zephyrian science." "I'm sorry," Lyra replied in carefully accented English. "I think there is mistake. My family were merchants, not scientists." "Of course they were," Dr. Vasquez agreed smoothly. "Just as you're simply a refugee with no special abilities or unique heritage." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus moved slightly, positioning himself between the visitors and Lyra. "I think you should leave," he said. "Mr. Chen, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Mr. Park spoke for the first time. His English was perfect, but Marcus caught the slight accent that suggested Korean wasn't his first language either. "We're not here to threaten anyone. Quite the opposite. Actually, we're here to make Miss Vance an offer," Dr. Vasquez continued. "Prometheus Biosystems is developing next-generation interface technologies for ancient artifacts. We need consultants with certain rare genetic markers. The compensation package includes a salary of 50 million credits annually, full medical coverage, housing, and complete legal protection." "Protection from what?" Marcus asked. "From people who would exploit her abilities for far less noble purposes," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Mr. Chen, you're a good man, and you've done an admirable job protecting Miss Vance for the past 6 months, but you're in over your head. There are organizations actively hunting for individuals like her. Military contractors, illegal research facilities, even remnant hegemony cells that survived the war." "And you're different?" Lyra asked, her accent slipping slightly. "We're legitimate. We're legal. And we're offering a partnership, not imprisonment." Dr. Vasquez pulled out a tablet and showed them what looked like a standard employment contract. Miss Vance would maintain her freedom, her identity, and her dignity. She would simply use her natural abilities to help advance human understanding of ancient technology. Marcus looked at the contract. The terms were indeed generous, almost impossibly so, which meant there was definitely a catch. "What happens if she says no?" he asked. Mr. Park and Dr. Vasquez exchanged a glance. "That would be unfortunate," Dr. Vasquez said carefully. "As I mentioned, there are other parties interested in Miss Vance. We've been protecting her location for several weeks now, but we can't guarantee that protection indefinitely." "You're blackmailing us," Marcus said flatly. "We're offering the best of several bad options," Mr. Park corrected. "Miss Vance can come with us voluntarily and live a comfortable life as a valued consultant. Or she can refuse and take her chances with whoever finds her next. Those people probably won't be as reasonable as we are." "Rever." Lyra stepped forward. "How long have you known who I am?" "Since about a week after you arrived on Earth, Dr. Vasquez admitted. "Your disguise is excellent, but genetic scanners don't lie. We've been watching." waiting for the right moment to approach you. And if I agree to work with you, what guarantees do I have that this partnership will remain voluntary? You have our word. And a legally binding contract, enforced by Earth's corporate courts. Your word, Lyra repeated. The word of people who have been spying on me for months. The word of people who could have simply taken you at any time, but chose to offer you a choice instead, Mr. Park replied. Marcus realized they were trapped. These people clearly had resources, connections, and most importantly, they had found Lyra, despite all their precautions. If Prometheus could find her, others would too. I need time to think about it, Lyra said finally. Of course. We'll give you 24 hours. Dr. Vasquez placed a card on Marcus's coffee table. Call the number when you've made your decision. Cross. Clan. After they left, Marcus and Lyra sat in silence for several minutes. Well, Lyra said eventually, I suppose hiding wasn't going to work forever. Lyra said. Lyra said. Lyra said. Lyra said. Lyra said. Lyra said. There has to be another option. Marcus insisted. We could disappear completely. Change identities again. Go somewhere they can't track us. Marcus, look at me. Lyra allowed her disguise to fade, her skin returning to its natural iridescent blue. I am what I am. Eventually, someone was always going to figure it out. The question is whether I want it to be corporate scientists or something worse. I won't let them turn you into a lab rat. They're not offering to turn me into anything. They're offering to pay me very well, to be exactly what I already am. Lyra moved to the window again, looking out at the city lights. Perhaps it's time to stop hiding and start using my abilities for something positive. Or perhaps it's time to find out exactly what those abilities really are, Marcus said slowly. Before we decide anything, I think we need more information. What do you mean? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. Your father said you could interface with ancient technology. Have you ever actually tried? A few times, when I was younger, but there wasn't much ancient technology on Zephyr Prime. A few artifacts in museums, some architectural fragments, but there's plenty here on Earth. The Sol system has 3 jump gates, plus the research stations studying ancient ruins on Europa and Titan. Marcus turned to face her fully. What if we found out exactly what you're capable of before we make any deals? That's incredibly dangerous. If someone detects me accessing ancient systems, then we'll know we're dealing with more than just corporate interest. But if your abilities are as significant as these people think, shouldn't we understand them ourselves? Lyra considered this for a long moment. There is a small, ancient artifact at the Tokyo National Museum, part of their xenoarchaeology exhibit. If I could touch it, without being detected, what would that tell us? Whether I'm truly as special as everyone seems to think, or whether I'm just another refugee with an interesting genetic heritage. She looked at him seriously. But Marcus, if I am what they think I am, if I can really access ancient technology, then everything changes. We won't just be hiding from bounty hunters and corporations. We'll be dealing with forces that could reshape galactic civilization. Then we'd better find out now, while we still have some control over the situation. Outside their apartment, Tokyo continued its nightly rhythm of lights and movement, but Marcus knew that whatever they discovered about Lyra's abilities would determine not just their future, but possibly the future of human expansion among the stars. The ancient secrets that had been hidden for millennia were about to be tested by a refugee princess with 3 fake identities and a human soldier who had never expected to become the guardian of galactic history. Tomorrow, they would learn whether Lirale Vexthari was truly the key to unlocking the greatest mysteries in the galaxy, or simply a young woman trying to build a new life far from home. The Tokyo National Museum closed to the public at 6 in the evening, but Dr. Kenji Nakamura worked late most nights. Marcus had served with Kenji's nephew during the war, and a few carefully placed calls had secured them a private after-hours viewing of the xenoarchaeology collection. Officially, They were there so Lyra could see artifacts from her homeworld as part of her cultural adjustment therapy. "This is highly irregular," Dr. Nakamura said, as he led them through darkened corridors, lined with display cases. "But Hiroshi spoke very highly of you, Mr. Chen. And Miss Vance, if seeing these pieces helps you feel connected to your heritage, I'm happy to arrange it." "Thank you," Lyra replied in her carefully practiced English. "It has been difficult, being so far from home." Marcus watched her closely as they walked. She'd been nervous all day, checking and rechecking her disguise, practicing casual conversation until it sounded natural. But now, approaching the ancient artifact, she seemed to be vibrating with barely contained energy. "Here we are, Doctor," Nakamura announced, stopping before a large display case in the center of the ancient technologies wing. "This is one of our most significant pieces, found in the ruins of Kepler Station after the war." Inside the case was what looked like a crystalline sculpture about the size of a basketball, composed of materials that seemed to shift between metallic and transparent depending on the viewing angle. Lights deep within the crystal pulsed in slow, hypnotic patterns. "We call it a memory crystal," Dr. Nakamura continued. "Based on our analysis, it appears to be some kind of data storage device, though we've never been able to access whatever information it contains. The neural interface ports are completely incompatible with known biology." Lyra stepped closer to the case, her eyes fixed on the crystal. "Has anyone ever tried to touch it directly? Who is active? Oh, that would be far too dangerous, Doctor." Nakamura laughed. "The energy readings alone suggest it could be quite harmful to organic matter. Plus, the insurance liability would be enormous." "Of course," Lyra agreed, but Marcus could see her studying the case's security system. "What kind of energy readings?" "Quantum field fluctuations, localized gravitational anomalies, traces of exotic matter. Whatever technology the ancients used, it operates on principles we barely understand." "Doctor," Nakamura checked his watch. "I should probably lock up soon, but feel free to look around for a few more minutes." After the curator left to secure other sections of the museum, Marcus and Lyra were alone with the crystal. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the display area, and the pulsing lights from the artifact seemed brighter in the dimness. "Can you do it?" Marcus asked quietly. "The case has a simple electromagnetic lock and basic proximity sensors," Lyra replied, her technical knowledge showing through her refugee persona. "I can bypass them, but once I touch the crystal, there's no telling what might happen. Ancient technology doesn't just interface passively. It responds to genetic markers with active neural connections. Meaning, I might learn something important, or I might fry my brain trying." She looked at him seriously. "Are you sure we need to do this? We could just take the corporate job and hope for the best?" Marcus thought about Dr. Vasquez and her carefully worded threats, about the other organizations supposedly hunting for people like Lyra, about the impossible situation they'd stumbled into. "We need to know what we're dealing with. If your abilities are as significant as they think, we should understand them before anyone else gets to exploit them." Lyra nodded and moved to the back of the display case. Her fingers traced patterns over the security panel that Marcus couldn't follow. But within seconds, the case's warning lights dimmed, and the electromagnetic field disengaged. "How did you? Ancient technology isn't the only thing I can interface with," she said with a small smile. "My education included practical applications." She reached into the case and gently lifted the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, everything changed. The crystal blazed to life with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. The air around it began to shimmer with the same effect Marcus had seen near the jump gates during the war. Reality itself seemed to bend and flex. But more dramatically, Lyra herself began to glow. Her carefully maintained human disguise fell away completely, as her true skin responded to the crystal's energy. The iridescent blue scales that covered her body lit up like a constellation, forming intricate patterns that pulsed in harmony with the artifact. Her dark eyes became luminous, reflecting depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Lyra? Marcus stepped toward her, but she held up her free hand to stop him. I can see it, she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that definitely weren't human. What do you mean? The network. The entire ancient infrastructure. Every jump gate, every station, every dormant facility scattered across the galaxy. Her voice was filled with wonder and something approaching terror. They're all connected, Marcus. They're all still active, just waiting for the right key to unlock them. The lights in the museum began to flicker as energy cascaded through systems that weren't designed to handle ancient technology. Marcus could hear alarms beginning to sound in distant parts of the building. We need to go, he said urgently. Wait. Lyra's grip on the crystal tightened. There's more. I can see why they wanted to breed my people. It's not just about genetic markers. It's about consciousness. The ancient technology requires a specific type of awareness to interface properly. Most species can touch it, but they can't truly connect with it. And you can? I am connecting with it. Right now, I'm linked to computational systems that have been running autonomous processes for thousands of years. They've been waiting. Marcus. Waiting for someone like me to wake them up. The alarms were getting louder, and Marcus could see security lights activating throughout the building. Lyra, we really need to leave before the hegemony found one, she interrupted, her luminous eyes wide with horror. They found an ancient facility and tried to force interface with it using prisoners from captured worlds. That's what started the war, Marcus. They weren't just expanding their territory, they were looking for more test subjects, more genetic combinations that might work with ancient technology. Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. More people like you? They never found any. But they did find something else. Lyra's connection to the crystal seemed to deepen, her entire body now glowing with its light. They found the Guardians. Lyra's connection. Lyra's contaround. Lyra's connection. Lyra's connection. What Guardians? The ancients didn't just disappear. They uploaded themselves into their technology, became part of the network itself, and they're still there. Watching. Waiting. The hegemony's experiments woke them up. Suddenly, Marcus understood. They started the war. The ancients used the hegemony's expansion to force a galactic conflict that would identify and gather people with the right genetic markers. Not just to identify them, Lyra said, her voice growing distant as she accessed deeper layers of the network. To test them. To see who could handle the responsibility of inheriting ancient technology. Responsibility for what? Before Lyra could answer, the museum's main lights came back on, and Marcus heard the sound of multiple vehicles arriving outside. Through the windows, he could see corporate security teams surrounding the building. We've been set up, he realized. Dr. Vasquez knew we'd come here. She wanted us to activate the crystal. Lyra's connection to the artifact suddenly intensified, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an authority that definitely belonged to someone who'd been trained to rule worlds. No, Marcus. She wanted me to access the network so she could track my neural signature. But what she didn't realize is that touching the network changes you. I'm not the same person I was 5 minutes ago. What do you mean? I mean, I now have access to every ancient facility in known space, including the ones that contain technologies that could remake galactic civilization overnight. And the consciousness that built those facilities is asking me whether humanity is ready for that kind of power. The sounds of forced entry echoed through the building. Armed figures in corporate uniforms were spreading through the corridors, moving with military precision toward their location. What did you tell them? Marcus asked. Lyra carefully placed the crystal back in its case, but her skin continued to glow with residual energy. I told them that humanity did something no other species has done in 10,000 years, when they found someone like me. Instead of enslaving or exploiting her, one human chose to protect and hide her. That suggests a level of moral development the ancients haven't seen before. And they're willing to make a deal. Lyra turned to face him fully. and Marcus saw that her eyes now held flecks of the same light that pulsed through ancient technology. They'll grant humanity limited access to ancient systems, but only under specific conditions. What conditions? The access has to be managed by someone they trust. Someone who's proven they'll put protection above profit, safety above power. She smiled, and despite everything that had changed about her appearance, it was still completely her. Congratulations, Marcus Chen. You're about to become the most important human in the galaxy. The corporate security team burst into the exhibition hall just as alarms began sounding throughout the museum. But instead of capturing 2 refugees, they found themselves facing something unprecedented. Dr. Vasquez, Lyra called out calmly as the corporate executive entered behind her security team. Thank you for providing this opportunity to access the network. It was quite illuminating. This. Dr. Vasquez stared at Lyra's transformed appearance, her scientific mind clearly racing to process what she was seeing. Miss Vance, I think we need to discuss a revised employment agreement. Actually, I think we need to discuss humanity's application to join the Galactic Ancient Heritage Program, Lyra replied. But that's a conversation for heads of state, not corporate executives. You're making a mistake, Dr. Vasquez said, her calm demeanor starting to crack. Prometheus Biosystems can offer you protections that no government can provide. I don't need protection anymore, Lyra said simply. I am the protection. As if to demonstrate her point, every piece of ancient technology in the museum suddenly activated. Crystals that had been dormant for millennia began to glow. Artifact displays came to life with cascading energy patterns, and the air itself began to hum with barely contained power. The ancient network has accepted my authentication, Lyra continued, her voice carrying easily over the sound of the awakening technology. I now have administrative access to jumpgate networks, planetary defense systems, and computational resources that span half the galaxy. Doctor, said 16 in Squed. Vasquez, did you really think you could hold that in a corporate laboratory? The security team was backing toward the exits as energy began arcing between the various artifacts. Dr. Vasquez stood her ground, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. What do you want? She asked. I want humanity to prove it deserves access to ancient technology. I want your corporation, and every other organization, hunting people like me, to back off and let us build something better. And I want the chance to use these abilities to help rebuild what the war destroyed, not to make rich people richer. That's not how the world works, Dr. Vasquez said. No, Lyra agreed. It's not how your world works, but it is how the ancient world worked, and they lasted for millions of years before ascending to something beyond physical existence. Maybe it's time for humanity to learn from that example. Marcus watched this exchange with growing amazement. In the span of minutes, Lyra had transformed from a hidden refugee into something approaching a goddess of technology. But when she looked at him, he still saw the frightened young woman who'd huddled behind debris while her father died. What happens now? He asked. Now we go home, Lyra said. And tomorrow, we start building a future where beings like me don't have to hide from beings like them. Dr. Vasquez made one last attempt. The offer stands, Miss Vance. 50 million credits annually. Complete autonomy. Full legal protection. Dr. Vasquez, Lyra replied with a smile that could have powered a city. I don't need your money, your autonomy, or your protection. I have access to technologies that could solve energy scarcity, enable faster-than-light communication, and provide unlimited resources for space exploration. Why would I trade that for a corporate salary? As they walked past the stunned security team and out of the museum, Marcus realized that everything had changed again. 6 months ago, he'd been a soldier, protecting a refugee. Yesterday, he'd been a civilian, hiding an alien princess. Today, he was apparently the liaison between humanity and a galactic heritage that spanned millennia. Any regrets? Lyra asked as they emerged into the Tokyo night. Marcus looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them were ancient facilities now awakening after centuries of dormancy, technologies beyond imagination waiting for someone wise enough to use them properly. Ask me in a few years, he said, when we see whether humanity is actually ready for this kind of responsibility. I have faith in your species, Lyra said. After all, when faced with ultimate power, the first human to find me chose to hide me rather than exploit me. That suggests you might be ready for what comes next. Above them, the stars seemed brighter than they had any right to be in a light-polluted city. But Marcus suspected that wasn't just his imagination. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place, and somehow he'd ended up at the center of it all. As they walked home through streets that suddenly seemed too small for the magnitude of what they'd discovered, Marcus reflected on how a single promise to a dying alien had led to humanity's inheritance of technologies that could transform the galaxy. Sometimes, he thought, the most important decisions were the ones you made without knowing their true consequences. And sometimes, protecting one person turned out to be protecting everyone.